Hello everybody, welcome to episode 26 of the Lethal Weapons stand-up comedy podcast with myself, Joey Jackson, my good friend Tommy Morley, Murph, who's unfortunately his last day with us today.
Wow.
Yeah, he's going on maternity leave. And our special guest, does he call you Tony Baloney?
No, I don't tend to use that anymore. We can talk about various guises of how.
Okay, so Tony Kinsella.
Yeah.
Great
to be here.
So a little bit about Tony, I suppose. I met Tony
1999, so 24, 25 years
25
back.
years ago, and the first gig I ever did was with Tony, and funnily enough, Tony's first ever gig was with me.
Yep.
Do you remember how nervous we were?
Yeah, and it still galls me that your comedy career is 10 minutes longer than mine, because you went on in slot 2 and I went on in slot 3. How things could have been different.
Oh, well, you know.
Where was that first gig at then? Where did you do it?
Comedy Balloon, wasn't it?
When it was in the Britain's Protection at that time. It's in the Ape and Apple nowadays, but yeah.
Next door to, you know, the Bridgewater Hall?
Yeah.
It was next door to Bridgewater Hall.
Just off Deansgate lot.
In a cave, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
It was upstairs, wasn't it? Because the joke was always, it's the only underground comedy club that's upstairs. Yeah.
It was a great night as well, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
A good,
No, a guy called Dave Turquoise had set it up, but the original name was the Worst Comedy Night in Salford. The Worst Comedy Night in Manchester. It was at the King's Arms for a while after that, and it was Salford. But yeah, so they were actually quite proud of the fact that it was supposed to be a really terrible night, which is why me and Joey were accepting it.
I think that was my first open mic, actually, when it was at Britain's Protection. It was Worst Comedy Night.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, I spoke to Dave actually. I'm going to try and get him on. He said he'll come on, but he was busy, which I don't know because he does fuck off.
That's all what he's busy with, but probably not comedy.
So
are you still gigging, Tony?
Yeah, still gig, yeah. Well, funnily enough, Joe and I are actually back at the Comedy Balloon this coming Wednesday, aren't we? So yeah.
It's a birthday gig, isn't it?
I always do one round about my birthday. Jason Cook, who runs it, has a birthday the day before me on the 29th. And mine's on the 30th, so just out of some sort of nostalgic thing, I always tend to go and do it on the nearest Wednesday to our respective birthdays. Loads of people I know have got a birthday at the end of September. And it took me ages to figure it out, but it's 9 months after New Year's Eve, so you can draw your own conclusions from that.
Yeah.
But I very rarely do the 10-minute open spots now. I've got into the habit of writing full-length shows. I work a lot with musicians as well. So I will occasionally just do a gig that's fun to do, but I'm not really chasing the 10-minute slots. I want to kind of develop one brand new show every year these days and make it a really comprehensive thing. Yeah.
So would you tour that show? Is that something you tour, or is it just sort of like one-off nights?
I tend to do 2 or 3, but the way it's tended to work, I'm doing one about the music of two-tone and the music of two-tone, the specials and so on, began in Coventry. So I've managed to negotiate to do it in the Two-Tone Museum, the home of Coventry. So even if I only did it that once and possibly got it filmed, I would move on to my next project. Yeah. I did one about a Northern Irish band from Derry called the Undertones. You might know Teenage Kicks is their most famous song. And again,
what's she called? I can't think.
You forget Fergal Sharkey.
Sharkey,
he's actually no longer with them. They split up and reformed with a new lead singer. But
a good art is hard to find.
But the weirdest thing, while we're on that topic, I wrote a show about the Undertones, and I'm a member of Bolton Socialist Club, so I can always put it on there. I usually put it on somewhere like the King's Arms. Joe came to see my Bob Dylan show fairly recently.
Quick one, sorry to interrupt you, but was trying to think yesterday, who owns the King's Arms? Is it the singer from the
It used to be. You're thinking of Paul Heaton.
Paul Heaton.
Yeah, it used to be. I believe he sold it now, though there's still a lot of his old memorabilia on the walls. Yeah, so he's still, he lived in Manchester a lot of his life after he became succcessed.
If only you'd have been here yesterday.
Yeah. If it had been Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I'd have called you.
So I did a show about the Undertones, and I actually saw them as an undergraduate at Leeds University, and it would have been about 1982. And they split up soon after that. They were on their uppers and they split up, and then they didn't do it. They all split up and they were in various other bands. And then in 99 they reformed, but without Fergal Sharkey. And I just noticed it would have been 2017. They were playing the same room in Leeds University where I'd seen them 35 years before. So I thought, just out of sheer curiosity, I'll go and watch them in the same room. And when I was driving back over the Pennines, I was thinking of the opening line of Teenage Kicks, their most famous song, which is Teenage Dream So Hard to Beat. And it got into my head that when I saw them in 1982, I was just coming out of my teenage years, and the Undertones were all just coming out of their teenage years because we're roughly the same age. So I ended up writing this whole show about what had happened to me in those 35 years and what had happened to the Undertones. So I use a lot of images, sort of PowerPoints, and I'd never been to Derry, which is where they're from. and I wanted to take pictures of Bogside and get an idea of what Derry's all about. And my son's a football journalist, and when I told him I was going across to Derry, he said, "Why don't you get in touch with the Undertones?" And I was like, "I can't do that. I've idolised them for 35 years. They're not going to be interested in what I've got to say." But of course, social media nowadays, I went on Facebook, there was an Undertones page, and I thought, it's just going to be a fan page, but I might as well post something. So I just posted saying, if anyone knows the Undertones, I'm going to be in Derry. If anybody's got an email address, I'd love to get in touch and tell them about this show. 2 days later, I got a random email, which was from a lady called Caroline, who's the wife of John O'Neill, who's the guitarist who wrote Teenage Kicks. And it basically just said, John said he's seen your message and he'll see you in the City Arms Hotel on the Sunday. It's like, no, it can't be that easy. So I met him. He gave me 2 hours of absolute golden stuff that I could never have researched, straight from the horse's mouth. And then came back home and I thought, he'd given me his email address because he said he'd sort us some tickets next time they were on tour. So being a bit cheeky, I just emailed him and said, I'd love to come to Derry and do this show. Do you know any pubs that would do it? Again, 2 days later, he messaged me back. Forget about pubs. My niece runs the Derry Playhouse Theatre. I've had a word with her and we'll put it on there. And it's like, well, this is somebody who's been my hero for 35 years. He's bending over backwards to help this nobody. And, 2 of them came to the show. One of them came and did a radio show with us to help us promote it. They're just unbelievable. So,
Awesome.
So that's why I do my own shows. You'd no idea where it's going to go once you start writing it.
I went to watch one you did on Bob Dylan, not Blood on the Tracks, wasn't it?
Blood on the Tracks, yeah.
That was really good.
Yeah.
I like it. It's good.
So I'm not a huge Dylan fan, but that album's always fascinated me, the Blood on the Tracks album, because he was with his wife for 10 years and then broke up. And most of his stuff's quite political, Masters of War and all that type of stuff. But this whole album, it's 10 tracks trying to come to terms with the end of his marriage, and he had 4 children with her. So I came up with this idea of a show where, again, I like to tell parallel stories. I like it to be partly about the artist and partly about my relationship with them. So I did a whole show about Dylan's breakup album, my own breakups, some of which was based on truth, some of it was just an excuse for a one-liner.
What was her name?
Which one? I had this running joke about Angela. Every single girlfriend I broke up with was called Angela. There was a big Freudian joke at the end that my mother was called Angela, but she wasn't. Yeah,
no, it's really good. I enjoyed that.
That's properly interesting. That I'm not a big music fan, but how you can
You
write.
like Bon Jovi, don't you?
Yeah, yes I do.
That proves he's not a big music fan. Yeah,
Get hammered for that, really, don't I?
Yeah.
But being able to write comedy parallel to sort of like a story of a musician, that's that's pretty.
I work with live musicians, so a guy called Kevin Bates did that show with me, and I did one about Kirsty MacColl with a brilliant singer-songwriter called Jess Silk. I went over to Derry to do a show with a guy called Steve O'Donoghue, so they kind of put songs in by the artist that sort of punctuate the story. So, for example, there was a poignant bit on the Undertones while as I say, I saw them at Leeds University, and when I was at Leeds University, a girl called Jacqueline got murdered, and she was the last victim of the Yorkshire Ripper. We didn't know at that time whether it was Peter Sutcliffe, but we found out after. So there's a really lovely ballad by the Undertones called Julie Ocean, and it kind of fitted for Steve to sing that one after the more serious story. So there was a nice thing about doing a show that's about an hour and a half. You can get lots of punchy one-liners in, but you can have a little bit of heart and soul to it as well, which I really like.
That's cool. What Kirsty MacColl's dad? No. I'm thinking Ewan Gregor. Yeah.
Ewan MacColl. Yeah.
Ewan MacColl. Yeah. And that's it. Ewan McGregor.
Salford lad like
he wrote Dirty Old Town about Salford. Yeah.
I live quite near there's a line about I kissed my love by the gasworks wall, and that gasworks wall, it's just a gasworks wall, but it's a protected site because of the song. And,
really?
I pass it quite regularly. It's not too far from Salford Lads Club, which obviously the Smiths made iconic as well. Yeah.
How do you pick what you're gonna sort of do your shows about? Is there like a process in your own?
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of slipped mostly into the musical thing. What happened was I hit 30 years teaching. I'm a teacher in further education. I teach English, mostly GCSE these days. Mm-hmm. And when I hit 30 years, I thought, I've never really written anything about being a teacher. I'd written the odd joke, and it suddenly struck me that I wanted to do a full-length show. And when you do teacher training, they always show you this thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's You know what I mean by that, yeah? So it's like your first needs are things like feeding yourself and food and stuff like that. And then it ends up with self-actualization. No idea why we did that in teacher training, because it's had no relevance whatsoever in me.
You've eaten stuff, haven't you?
Sorry?
You've eaten stuff, though.
I have eaten stuff, so I suppose in a roundabout way, but I think I probably would have eaten even if I hadn't done Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to be quite honest, yeah. So I wrote a show called I Belong to Maslow, which was partly talking about that. So when I finished that show, I thought, I should set myself the target. of writing a full-length show every year, and just sort of challenge myself to make it better and better. So I tend to write 1.5 hour show working with a musician, and I just basically perform it 2 or 3 times. And people say to me, you spent a year writing it and researching it and practicing it, and then you've just done it 2 or 3 times. That assumes that the writing and planning process is hard work. That's the bit that I really love.
So,
Once I've done it, then obviously I want to put it in front of an audience, but sitting at home doing research and discovering wonderful things like that, and as I say, getting to know people through it. So then I started. I'm really passionate about music, so the Undertones was my big one. As I say, I did one about Dolores O'Riordan of the Cranberries. I did one about Kirsty MacColl, the Bob Dylan show. But I also am a massive fan of a German football team from Hamburg called FC St. Pauli, which basically the German second division team, but they became really globally famous because they're basically the anti-fascist club, and that's where my politics lie kind of thing. So I did a show about them called Don't Fear the Reeperbahn, because the St. Pauli place is right at the end of the Reeperbahn in Hamburg. So it's whatever grabs me really, and usually when I'm working on one show, I'm already kind of thinking ahead about, you can stumble across something on TV, you can, stumble across something in a book, or I can listen to a particular album and think I should do something with this. So something triggers while I'm in the process of writing one. Something triggers in the back of my mind, and I just make note. Maybe I'll have 2 or 3 ideas, and then when I finish this project, I'll look at my 2 or 3 other ideas and say, that's the one that I feel would be the most interesting to research. And then it's what's out there. There's documentaries about the Undertones, there's a biography, so if there's lots of material, then you get, the jokes will write themselves sometimes. You'll just come across something in a book or a documentary and say, that's a fascinating story, and I can do something with it.
Have you got any coming up?
Well, the next one is going to be the two-tone one, which is kind of more or less written. I do poetry as well.
I've got a couple of your books, poetry.
You have, haven't you? Yeah. One of my best customers.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd never done a full-length poetry show, so I thought I'll have a musician working with me again. I'm going to work with Steve O'Donoghue, who did the Undertone show with me, and I'm just going to do it mostly poetry. There'll be a little bit of short storytelling, but it'll be a mix. So again, it's one of those things where I've listened to the specials and the Selector and people all my life, and it's suddenly thought, well, I've never done anything about that, So there's all these things that are kind of part of my passion, but just tapping into the bit that I'm most interested in. So it's a show called Born Under a Thundering Sky, which is all about the British two-tone ska movement, and again, there's lovely stories in there. There's about 3 or 4 biographies which I've now read, so there's loads of material there. So it's that really. It's what grabs me, and what's got lots of material out there to tap into.
Yeah. When is that show? Have you got any dates?
in Coventry for April. But what I tend to do, as I say, I'm a member of Bolton Socialist Club. You've got the King's Arms in Salford, so I tend to do a couple of shows for friends and family and drag a few other punters off the street. And then by the time I go to Coventry to do it in the heart of two-tone, I will have already done it twice, so I will have ironed out any wrinkles or tweaked it and things like that. Yeah.
So when you were gigging years ago with Joe,
right,
did he still have this photographic memory that he's got now?
I can't remember.
Oh, we had some good times, didn't we? When you think back, I mean, we've got to talk about the what's it.
Yeah, let's go back to the beginning. Yeah.
We've got we did some mad stuff. It was different times then as well, wasn't it? I mean, some of the stuff you used to go up to and stuff, it was just crazy, wasn't it? Really.
How do you think it's changed? Like what's the bit like between you starting comedy 25 years ago and
more than anything, I'd say the volume of what's actually going on. When we started, there was the Comedy Balloon, there was Toby Haydock runs Excess Malarkey, there was the Frog and Bucket.
What was it called? Excess Malarkey?
It was called Scruffy Murphy's. Murphy's Comedy Club or something, wasn't it? So
in the church, wasn't it?
And there was a guy called Des Sharples used to run one in the Iguana in Cholton. So I'd say there was only 4, unless you were ready for the Comedy Store, which we never were we? But we done
we did the Comedy Store,
but not Friday and Saturday night, 250 quid gigs now. But so there was a handful of gigs, but nowadays people have got more aware of it. Maybe it's been more traditionally on the TV. When I first went to the Comedy Balloon, I had no idea there was that kind of circuit. I'd seen sort of Lee Evans in gigs and things like that, and I was obviously aware of the Bird & Manning Working Man's Club, which was never going to be my scene because of my politics. And then I teach English, and I was teaching English A-level at the time. And there's one of my students was a lad who Joey will know only too well, called Alan Wilde, and Wild by name and nature. And he was in my class.
Have you heard anything from him?
No, I've completely lost contact with him, but he was in my A-level class, and there used to be a coursework element to the A-level. And you could write whatever you want. You could do poetry, you could do a novel, open chapter of a novel, you could do a short story. And Alan came to me at break time and just said, I do stand-up comedy. Could I submit my comedy set as my writing? And I said, well, first of all, yes, because you had to analyse your writing, so it's a brilliant thing to analyse, you know, how the comedy takes shape. And then I said, where do you do comedy? So he said, there's this pub in Manchester, and I had no idea that this circuit existed. And Alan was going on tour with Johnny Vegas, and Joe knows him. He was a very eccentric character, so it's probably quite a good opening act for Johnny Vegas.
Yeah,
and
beams.
I started meeting him and writing stuff. I had no vision of going up on stage at this point. I'd always written stuff, poems and stuff like that, but I could never imagine myself in front of an audience. So I said to Alan, let's be fair, his material wasn't particularly strong when I did see him, and when I saw what he'd written. So I said I could probably write jokes for you, and he was learning to drive at the time, so he sat down and made a load of jokes about driving lessons and stuff. He went on tour with Johnny Vegas, and he was phoning me, this was pre-internet days, he was phoning me every so often saying, well done, that material's going down great, I'm doing really well. So I said, when he played Manchester with Johnny Vegas, I was working because I did night classes, so I couldn't see it. So he said, when I'm back in Manchester, there's this thing called a comedy balloon at the Britain's Protection, come and watch us. So I went along to watch him to see how my jokes were received. But Alan being Alan, if somebody heckled him in the first 30 seconds, he would just improvise for the next 10 minutes. So I said to him at the end, I'm a bit disappointed, Alan, because I came along to hear you do the set that I wrote for you, but you didn't do any of it. He said, why don't you come back next week and do something? So I just burst out laughing and said, yeah, like I could do comedy. And I was driving back home that night and I thought, if I learned like 8 or 9 minutes of stuff and did it next week, would I have been the worst person on tonight? I wouldn't have been the best person on because there was a couple of really good ones. Would I have been the worst? Absolutely not, because there was a couple of people, won't mention any names, who absolutely stunk the place out. So I thought, what have you got to lose? I think this is where most people do the first gig, isn't it? Let's give it a go. If I die on my ass, there's nobody I know in the room, so nobody will ever know about it.
Yeah.
And if I do really well, I might do it a little bit more. And I just turned up the following week. I had some prop notes, which was perfectly okay if you're a first-time comedian. So I had some of the key lines written down. Not saying I absolutely killed, but I got a few laughs, and it was enough that I wanted to do it the following week. And then both of us pretty much did it every week after that, didn't we? We would turn up week in, week out.
Yeah.
And there's some people who would do the same set every week, so you're absolutely bored of hearing the same jokes.
Yeah.
And that's fair enough, because some people would try to hone the 10 minutes so they could go and do stuff all over the country, but I work full time and I never had an ambition to travel with it, so I just kept on writing new material every week, and sometimes it was good, sometimes it was crap, but like I say, I love the creative process. So as soon as I finished one gig, I was already thinking, right, what worked there, what can I do that would be better next week? So it sort of generated the writing more than anything for me.
Yeah, I'm similar to that. I really enjoy the process of writing and thinking and getting it all, because I see it in patterns as well. Like there's got to be the same, like the correct amount of syllables in it and stuff like that. Like it sounds.
It's the rhythm of a joke, isn't it? Sometimes,
It's not just the words that are written down. Yeah, it's weird, but
there's a very good one that Tim Vine,
yes.
the one-liner comedian, and he had this joke. I remember seeing him interviewed, and he said he had this joke that went during the Apollo missions, they developed all sorts of important things for society. And one of them was Velcro, but they charged too much for it, and everybody said that's a rip-off. And then he then rewrote the joke that just went, Velcro, what a rip-off. And he said, it's now 5 or 6 words.
Yeah.
And the quality of that punchline doesn't justify 30 seconds of...
What did he call it? Brevity?
Brevity is the soul of wit, isn't it? Yeah. So, it's an interesting point that, like you say, it's the rhythm, it's the shot. Not every joke has to be 5 or 6 words, but sometimes that's the joke at its purest, yeah.
Yeah. Because my comedy's more like storytelling and talking about my life sort of thing and what's going on at that particular time.
Yeah.
So it's hard not to be too wordy.
Yeah.
You've got to write it and then cut the shit out of it, basically.
I think that's why I started doing these full-length shows, because my 10-minute slots are all one-liner, which was what I always did back in the comedy balloon days. I just like doing one-liners. But then I thought, maybe I should challenge myself to do a bit more of the storytelling stuff. But so I've seen, for example, Stuart Francis live, and he's a brilliant one-liner comedian, the Canadian guy.
Yeah.
And it's like after about 15 or 20 minutes, I'm thinking, I'm kind of getting a bit bored now. These jokes are all great, but it's just bang, 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 bang,
it's
bang.
Harder.
Yeah.
Which is 5 to 10 minutes. So,
I think that must be, for me, it'd be the hardest form of comedy is one-liners. To be able to write an hour's worth of one-liners would be so difficult. Like Anthony Jeselnik's sort of like, not a one-liner comedian, but like I'd say maybe 2-liner. But that must be so hard to write so many joke.
I saw Gary Delaney at the dance house, and Gary Delaney, and
is he married to?
He's married to Sarah Millican.
Sarah Millican, yeah.
So he did a thing where he suddenly went on he changed a load of Wikipedia pages in various ways. You can just go on and change Wikipedia. So, for example, the Stroke Society, and he'd done it so it sort of all veered off to the left. Lots of things like that. So kind of halfway through, he suddenly had like 10 minutes of visual stuff, and then there's a guy called Dimitri Martin, brilliant comedian from America, who does loads of stuff with music. And so yeah, if you are a one-liner comedian, you perhaps need to, well, if you're doing 10 minutes, it's fine. But if you're doing a longer set as a one-liner comedian, you probably need a little bit more scope, don't you?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
That's why I use the music. So if you're getting bored of me telling jokes for 10 minutes and somebody comes up and does a song.
I think it's quite hard to do. I mean, it's acoustic music in it. I think it needs to be, because I think it's quite hard to do. I always remember doing, Vince Hatter, is that his name? And he does like a loop station. So it's basically, he records, it's dead clever how he does it, but he records it and builds it up, and it's all done through this effect. It's a really good act. But I went on after him, I think I might have been at the Balloon or somewhere like that, and he was trying it out, I think, before he went somewhere else. And it was just like, no one was interested in what I had to say, because it was like full-on music. And I always think it's really hard to come on, The
key to that as well, it had validity as music, and then he's doing funny songs on top of it. I think somebody who can't play the guitar and he's just using it as a prop. But Vince was he's really into that kind of type of music, isn't he? And he really made it work. Yeah,
it's really, really cool. But like you say, to follow it, he just got no chance, because it's like. But that's like you say with the acoustic, I think it's a nice balance. I think it's good.
Yeah.
It must be difficult though to write music, like comedy music, because I haven't got an ear for music at all. I just can't. Like, I've tried to learn guitar years ago, can't do it. Just to be able to combine it with...
Are you good at maths?
No.
You usually find that if you're good at guitar, you're good at maths.
No, I'm rubbish at... I won't say I'm rubbish at, I just have no interest in it.
It doesn't add up.
If something, it doesn't add up, exactly.
Well, my other project that I've been involved with for about... We were trying to figure it out last night, because we had a gig last night. We think it's probably about 9 years. But I'm in a group called Bard Company, Bard as in the poet. And it's me and two other poets, Jeff Dawson and Ian Whiteley. But I'm Bolshy Bard, not just because we're politics, because I'm the one who argues about everything. And we got Punky Bard and Rocky Bard. So basically, there's a brilliant Rocky Bard. He's into his heavy metal stuff and Punky Bard.
You meant like,
But we've made technically 3 albums, although the first one was an absolute disaster. We didn't know what we were doing, so we tend to draw a line under that one. And we're making a 4th one in October. But we go to a place in Wigan called Wigan Music Project, and there's an absolute genius called John Kettle, who's a lead guitarist of a band called Merry Hell, who are very successful in Wigan, used to be the Tansads, and we basically book studio time and pay him for it, and we bring in the lyrics to the songs, and I'm not a singer at all. I can sort of bark out punky stuff and do sort of poetic raps, and we just give John a bit of an idea about how we hear it in our heads. He picks up an acoustic guitar and picks out a tune in about 15 minutes, and then he plays electric guitar, he plays bass, he puts some drums on electronically, and by the end of the day, you've got a track that sounds like it's a band playing. And then I'm not very technical, but the other guys are, and we just have it on an iPad. They plug in the iPad and blast it out, so we don't need much of a sound check, and then we just sing live. So there's a couple of cover versions in there, but it's mostly original songs. We started off doing quite comedic stuff, and we actually did do the Comedy Balloon, but we sort of slightly veered more into a political anthems direction these days. So it's great fun to do, and it's we did a gig in Burnley last night. We tend to get all the festivals in the summer, so we get a lot of work through that, which I wouldn't be able to get as a solo artist.
That's cool. Something that I suppose we should talk about as well was Comedy Balloon. Was we tried? We had 0 budget. It was all done. 2 things you always remember about Comedy Balloon. Well, I think we're getting Jason on, so I won't talk too much about it. In fact, I was going to say about the post, the sign. Remember the sign we had? But I'm not going to say. I'll save that for when Jason's on. But the other thing that we did, which we've got to talk about, was we were trying to get punters in, so we come up with this idea that we'd create a world record. Right, and we did the most comedians on one stage in one night.
Stand Up 100.
Yeah,
Stand Up 100. Yeah.
And it started as just an idea really, but we actually went through with it. We did it. Was it Christie's the first one we did?
Yeah. Christie's we raised money for, didn't we? Yeah.
The Dance House Theatre which is opposite the BBC buildings. I don't know if it's still there.
It is still there. Yeah. It's still going strong.
It's a proper theatre. We basically
107 in the first one.
And then we redid it and got 7 comedians we had on in one night. But this was before the internet as well, so it was all...
to phone everybody. There was only really 2 people who promoted, which was Agraman. I did mention the Buzz before when I started about the Comedy Club. The Buzz was a brilliant one, A guy called Agraman, who's now moved out to Hull, but was an absolute institution in Manchester.
He still runs a night in Sale.
Does he? All right, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I seen him. I went into town, the Fab Cafe a bit ago. Yeah, it was Aquaman, yeah. With John Warburton.
Right.
And he bumped into him while he was there. I can't remember him. We were chatting to him about that, and he still
there was him, there was Agraman, there was Toby Haydock, and they just basically had these big Rolodex Filofax with loads of phone numbers in. I must have ripped off an absolute fortune ringing from work without anybody knowing that I was making personal calls. Because this is, as Joey said, it was pre-internet days. It was early part of the century, wasn't it? 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
And then we basically just got 100 comedians on one night. Dance house was ideal because it had a huge dressing room and a staircase. So you literally had... we had the comedy police, didn't we? We got these mostly attractive young girls for some reason, wasn't it? So
it was my missus.
Your missus was So we had... you had to do a minute, and obviously if you went over a minute, there's no way we were going to get 100 people on, and it would have ended up running on after midnight or whatever. So we had this idea that if you went over a minute, a red light came on, and the comedy police, which is just some girls in, was it policemen's helmets or something?
German helmets.
And army helmets, That's a good one,
German helmets.
But we were the biggest thing in Manchester that day, weren't we? We were on kind of up north on the TV, we were on all the Radio 4 and all this type of thing, doing interviews.
I think he was what's his name? Come down, didn't he? From
guy Alan Beswick from Radio Manchester was one of our witnesses.
What's his name? He was dead sound. I can't think of his name. A DJ does all the... You like that's good, isn't it? So stand up 100. So we've got 100 comedians on one stage. We've done that bit.
103, I think.
103, 107 it was. I've still got
107.
All of.
And who was the last person to go on?
Can't remember.
It was some pub comedian called John Bishop. Genuine. Only because he'd been gigging somewhere else and he came quite late. So he went on about 11.
Yeah.
I don't know what ever became of him, but he closed the show. He was the headliner. That was a joke he made, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He's starting again. John Bishop. He's starting over.
I didn't know he'd stopped.
Yeah, so he's gone back to circuit comedy because he wants to kind of carry it on again. I've seen it on a podcast somewhere. I can't remember which podcast it was.
Oh, right.
So he's gone over to New York and started doing New York comedy shit because nobody knows who he is. Nobody knows his set and stuff like that. And he wants to get back into, from what I've heard. But yeah, he was class, John Bishop. I really like John Bishop.
Yeah, great. He's a lovely bloke as well.
We had some good. I mean, we created loads of trouble as well because was it? I don't know if we can say it, can't we? The Comedy Store didn't want anyone doing it, did they?
They get a little bit political, didn't they?
Yeah, and it became... But at one point, the Comedy Store let us use the phones for ringing, didn't they?
They did, yeah. Remember that? Yeah. Gave us people like Archie Kelly and Tony Burgess and people like that, yeah.
So why didn't they want you doing it?
It all got dead political because...
it was a Friday night and they have their show on a Friday night, so they probably felt we were going to take a load of audience away from them.
Right.
Yeah.
I think our gig was £5 and there's about 12 on it, so... Yeah.
And I think the most famous thing is, right, which is... And it's the best thing ever, and it still makes me laugh. And what's the guy called? I can't remember his name. He runs Frog and Bucket.
Yes. Pearl and Dean music, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh, God,
so basically, you know when you do the Frog, you get
Dave Perkins. Dave Perkins, yeah.
Top bloke he is, right? But when you used to do like the Beat the Frog. You know, they do that whack whack whack. They used to Pearl and Dean you, right? And if you're doing shit. It just
it was the old cinema music when the adverts were
coming on, to get you off the stage.
Right.
So anyway, it was. So we talked him into doing it. So he actually did the stand up one. He was one of the comics in it, and he got to a minute, and you had to do a minute and no more than 2 minutes. That was the rule for the record.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
As soon as he got to a minute, we Pearl and Deaned him off. It went,
everybody in the audience just. And to be fair to him, he took it really well.
He did. But honestly, I'm sure he still hates me for that.
Yeah. But what I do remember about Stand Up 100, and Tommy was asking before about how the circuit has changed, I found probably a more interesting answer. We had to work really hard and be really positively proactive in trying to get female acts and ethnic acts, people of a different ethnicity. I think we probably ended up with about maybe a dozen females out of the 107 that we got, and that was actively looking for female acts because we used to have meetings once a week to see how we were getting on. And at some point, being the real lefty out of the group, I just said, right, we've got 65 acts, they're all white and only 2 of them are women. So we started actively, look, and it was just in 99, 2000, there weren't that many female comedians out there. We really struggled to get any ethnic ones. You mentioned Vince Atta before, who I think did it. So there was a couple of people from a non-white background, for want of a better term, but with the best will in the world. Nowadays, obviously, Ramesh Ranganathan and, there's so many different... Shapi Kasandi, she actually calls herself the box ticker because she's female and Iranian. So it's very different in terms of who it's attracting, but you almost kind of feel it was a bit of a sort of white privileged, slightly male close shot, didn't you, in terms of who was doing it?
It's
25 years ago.
Like during the 90s, when I've watched stand-up comedy all my life, and like during the 90s, I grew up getting the Def Comedy Jam videos, like the American Def Comedy Jam videos. So that's like the sort of comedy I grew up watching.
They were Def doing it?
No. It was called Def Comedy Jam. Oh. There was like Martin Lawrence started on there, Chris Rock started there. It was, and it's so good. Like, I can still watch them shows from the 90s and it's still just as good.
I think
incredible.
There's a couple of TV shows, wasn't there? There was The Real McCoy, which was a load of black acts who did BBC Two sketch stuff, and then The Goodness Gracious Me, which was more kind of Asian acts. But I heard there's a show on Radio 4 called The Reunion, where they bring people back together from various backgrounds, and they had the cast of The Real McCoy. And they were saying it was really important, it was really groundbreaking. There had been a sitcom called Desmond's a little bit before, but it was still relatively rare, even then. We're going back about 15 years now. And they actually said, they did The Real McCoy, and then they said, right, we'll move on to something else now. And it was almost like, right, we've done black, shall we do women next year? Yeah. But, is it the history of David Copperfield, the Armando Iannucci film, where he talked about colourblind casting? And David Copperfield just happens to be Asian, but he's got white parents, but it's not questioned. That's kind of the way it should be, isn't it, in the 21st century, that it's not an issue what colour you are. And then you've then got the argument about, by actively looking for women, is it almost a kind of form of positive discrimination in itself? Shouldn't everything? But I know for a fact there's been gigs that have been...
That's deep, that is.
Yeah, well, there's definitely been gigs where there's been two female comedians, and then the promoter has just suddenly contacted one of them and said, we're going to have to take you off the bill because Friday night and Saturday night audiences won't accept two female comedians on the same bill. They probably would. It's just perceived that they wouldn't, so...
Yeah, I don't think that's much of an issue now, is it? I don't...
Not as much.
No. Definitely in terms of what you said about how the circuit's changed, I think that's probably one of the very positive changes that's happened.
Absolutely, yeah.
Something that I was talking to, I can't remember, a lady, and she was saying that what she does quite a bit of now, and I thought it was a dead interesting idea, is matinees. So she does like comedy to a group of ladies who've got kids or whatever in the afternoon, because they can take the kids and then they can sit and watch comedy. And I never even thought of that. I thought it was a really good idea.
There was a female comedian called Karen Bailey from Birmingham.
I remember Karen.
And I saw her at the Frog and Bucket one Friday night, and she absolutely smashed it. She has an incredible gig. And I live in Swinton near Salford, and there's not really any comedy nights around there, but somebody tried to set one up in a pub. Toby Haydock was comparing it the first one, and I lived like literally 5 minutes away. So I turned up, it was a midweek gig, it was a Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that, and Karen Bailey was on. And I was chatting to her just before she went on and said, I saw you at the Frog and Bucket on Friday, you absolutely smashed it, you're going to have a brilliant one. She said, no, I'm going to die tonight, I'm going to die on my ass. So I said, how do you mean? She said, just look around the room. I said, it's nearly all couples, boyfriends and girlfriends together. And the Frog and Bucket was sort of stags and hens, so you had like... And she said, if there's a boyfriend and a girlfriend there, the girl won't laugh because she's jealous that I'm on stage and the boyfriend's watching me. And the guy won't laugh because he'll get a load of grief off his girlfriends afterwards. And I saw her get up and do the same 20 minutes that had absolutely killed it at the Frog and Bucket and really struggled to get any laughs. I was laughing, even though I'd heard it before. So again, maybe attitudes have changed quite a lot because there's a much kind of more gender and ethnic mix nowadays.
Do you think you can talk yourself out of a gig in that way, though? So I've been at gigs where comedians have looked at the crowd, and before they've gone, oh, I'm going to die on my ass tonight. And like they've already got it in their head that they're going to die on their... It sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Some of the best gigs I've had is the ones where I thought I was going to die. If you go up sort of cock of the door thinking I'm going to smash it. There was a gig somebody ran, a guy called Dave Purdy who's passed away now, he used to run a few gigs, and he ran one in a pub in Eccles, and it was the day we were on. I was in another double act called The Bootleg Mark Chapman's, which is a half man half biscuit joke, and it was a guy with guitar and me doing comedy songs, and it was the day that Johnny Wilkinson kicked the if anybody's a rugby fan, he did the drop kick that won the World Cup at 8 o'clock in the morning, and all the pubs had opened for that final.
I watched it.
And there was a load of guys in with rugby shirts on who'd been in there since 8 o'clock, absolutely, smashed out their heads kind of thing. And nobody was paying any attention. Dave was trying to compare this comedy gig. Everyone was just talking and laughing. And we went up to Dave and said, I think we were getting paid. I just said, keep the money. With no point in going on. He's going, I've got an obligation to the landlord. If I don't do it, then I won't get paid either. So he said, well, we'll go up, but if no one's listening, we'll just give it 5 minutes and then we'll get off. So he said, fine. And we had a song at the time, Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. And it was the Scotland World Cup song. And it was a parody of the Chumbawamba one. It was, we get knocked out, then we go home again. We always book a return flight. We get knocked out, and we go home again because Scotland are a shower of shite. So we started with that, and all these rugby fans suddenly realised what we were singing, and we're absolutely mad for it. And then for the next 20 minutes, we just absolutely served the crest of a wave. And it was like we just assumed it was going to be the worst gig ever, and it was probably one of the best ones we ever had. So it's an interesting point, isn't it? Yeah, I think you're right. I think comedians can convince themselves that the gig's going to be good or bad. Yeah. Until you get to that microphone, you've absolutely got no idea.
That's it. We did a gig in Pulton the Fylde, and the first, I'd probably say 2 or 3 rows were, I'd say average age was about 72, and I think the comedian was like, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" Like they're not going to. It was all like young lads on there, and it was a case of just went out, did my normal stuff. I thought, okay, I'm just going to do my normal stuff, which is a bit risque, a little bit dirty. They loved it. Yeah, absolutely loved it.
Yeah,
So I think it's a case. If you already think you're going to die, I think you've just got to go out and do your words. Just say your stuff. And
what's interesting, what you said about the age of the audience as well. Again, you can't really read an audience just because they're a certain age or a certain gender or whatever. And the political stuff I do with this group called Bad Company, we normally play safe havens. We play Bolton Socialist Club. We play all these left-wing festivals like Wigan Diggers, and we know they're going to be on the same page politically. But we did one in Chorley Festival, which wasn't a political festival. And when we went in, one of the other guys said, "There's a few old ladies and things in here. I don't know whether they're going to like it. We should change the set." And I said, absolutely not. We do what we do. If people don't like the politics of it, then that's fine. We're not saying we're going to convert anybody. And these 2 old ladies got up after 5 minutes and walked out. And I consider that a badge of honour because we do what we do. Yeah. And the idea that let's tone it down a little bit because we don't want to upset anybody, well, why are we doing it in the first place then?
Absolutely. I think you've just got to do your own thing, haven't you?
Yeah.
Just got to do what you do. If people don't like it, they don't like it. Not everyone's going to like you anyway, are they?
I had a thing with that where I used to know off the first line how it was going to go, basically. So you do your opening joke and you'd know straight away if it's going to be a good gig or a bad gig. But that trips you up sometimes.
Oh, I thought you meant if you could remember your first line, it was going to be a good gig.
It's a right element.
A little story I really love as well. There's a Canadian comedian called Tony Law who's done quite a lot of telly, and he always does an Edinburgh Fringe show. And I entered a competition. It was the Daily Telegraph. In fact, the final was at Hull and John Bishop won it. Talking to John Bishop before. Yeah. But
Clint Boone. That's the guy who was.
Is that what you call it? Is that what you call a callback joke? Yeah, right. You completely thrown me now. Completely forgot what the story was I was about to say.
You were saying about John Bishop winning the Telegraph.
Yeah, so it was. That's it. Yeah, so they did it slightly differently. What normally happens with a comedy competition, I'm not a big fan of the competitions, but we all used to enter them back in the day, didn't we? And there's one particular one, the Daily Telegraph one, and instead of doing a night with a load of comedians in competition with each other, they gave you a 10-minute guest spot in the middle of a professional gig. And I went to Liverpool to a gig that Tony Law was headlining, and I actually got to the final, so I did okay on the night. And I went back into their green room, and Tony Law was giving me loads of advice. I really like that one. You should have timed that one. There's a chance of a callback on that one. And I said to him, it's really nice of you to spend time, with this nobody telling me, giving me advice. And he just said, I've done stand-up comedy for about 15 years, and I've also done acting in plays. And he said, if you're in a play, you could absolutely stink the place out and have a really crap performance, but you'll still get the curtain call at the end, and you can still go home thinking, I've done really well tonight. If you're a comedian, you die on your ass. You know you've died on your ass because you walk off to the sound of your own footsteps, or you get people heckling you and stuff. So his theory was that any actors out there, can sometimes be a little bit up themselves because they think they're God's gift. Whereas comedians, whether you're Peter Kay, whether you're John Bishop, whether you're absolutely anybody, you've had a really terrible gig somewhere along the way. So you can actually empathise with other comedians that you see dying on the backside. So it's always a big no-no with compares to make a sarcastic comment about somebody who's gone badly, so it's a more supportive industry, I would say, than both the acting and I would say the poetry circuit as well.
So we were talking about leading on from that, like when you do the Beat the Frog or these competitions, it's actually pretty bad for your sort of mental health, I think, because the best comment I've ever had is, I thought you were okay. And it's just the worst thing ever.
I once had a comedy bloom where this lady came up, I think there had been maybe 11 or 12 acts on, and she came up to me at the end and said, well done, you were the third best. And I was telling Tommy before though, the Comedy Store one, the Gong Show, they still do it. They do something similar to Frog and Bucket. They give 3 members of the audience red cards, and if you said it's 2 red cards now, it used to be 3. Yeah. But I genuinely went to the Gong Show at the Comedy Store, they gave out the red cards. This young lad came on stage, slightly dark skin, and he came up to the microphone and just said, "Good evening, I'm from a Jewish background," and the first red card went up. So everybody's like, "Oh my God, they're giving a red card to a fascist." It's brutal, isn't it? It's meant to be.
Yeah. I apologise now for doing that.
I think it was Alexis Sale who started it at the London Comedy Store, wasn't it? You're supposed to give it's the audience's night. So the audience is supposed to give you absolute hell, so you've got to go on stage knowing that that's the case. Yeah. And if you only last for 20 seconds, it's not a judgment on how good you are.
Yeah, to try and
that's my excuse anyway.
Sort of get like, with Beat the Frog, you sort of get a minute's grace, don't you? The compers always say.
Not always.
No, that's what I mean. They say try and give them a minute's grace and see how they get on. They may be setting something up. But I've also seen people get gonged off at 40 seconds.
Yeah, 38 seconds.
Yeah.
Have you ever beaten it? I've done the Frog once and the Comedy Store once. It's one of those, once you've done it once, there's really no point in doing it again.
I did. I beat them both, didn't I? I think we all did in the end, didn't we?
They used to have a clap off. I seem to remember it was Mick Ferry who was compared, and I got to the end and there was 3 of us, but I didn't win the clap off, so I was happy enough that it survived.
No, because I got a gig at the Comedy Store. I think that was on a Friday, but I used to do an open.
You would do one open spot, I did it before it was ready.
That's what, if you won that, then you got to that. Back in the day, I shit myself, it was awful.
I had a terrible gig,
That was a big gig.
I think we all got a bit cocky because we got a couple of laughs at the Comedy Balloon and thought we could stand up in front of the Comedy Store audience on a Friday. I just about got away with it, but no more than that.
Yeah, this is the one and only time I'll be doing Beat the Frog. I'll not be going. It's not a nice feeling.
You did dead well. You tried doing crap at it. It's awful.
It's not like it's the bit before, and it's the anxiety of waiting for a card to go up. Do you know what I mean? Like constantly looking for it.
I really like it, but I make a point of when they're handing the cards out, I look where the cards are going, and then when I'm on stage, I don't look in those directions.
Right.
So if I see a card go up, then my mind might just blank.
Yeah.
So I purposely just look around and avoid where the cards have gone. But I've done it about 10 times now. But I really enjoy it.
You're a psychopath, man.
That's where I've gone wrong, because last time someone put the card up and I put the V's up to him.
Oh, really? Yeah. One thing I remember about the early days of the Frog is that there was a couple of acts. There's a guy whose name I don't remember, but he used to do impressions. And he'd turn up with a load of his mates. His mates would be dead enthusiastic about getting a card, but then they'd make sure they carded everybody off apart from him. And then you'd see him having a pint with them at the end. It defeats the whole object of it, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's good. It's good though. It's good. I think it was less when we used to do it. It was less competitive almost. Then it was all a bit more camaraderie. I think everyone looked after each other and had a laugh and that. Whereas now, everyone thinks they're going to be the next biggest star and make loads of money from it. I think.
I think people just want a spot. They want to try, don't they, at an actual Beat the Frog, an actual Frog and Bucket gig, which is what you get a Thursday night from it, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. But I just meant in general. I think there's a lot more. It's a lot more cutthroat almost that people, thinking, "Oh, I'm going to be the next I'm going to make." So I don't know.
Looking back to those days when we started, how many of them have really gone on to make a name for themselves? We mentioned John Bishop, Justin Morehouse has done okay, but
there's loads really. Because you think we used to gig regular, like with Peter Kay, wasn't there? There was like
he's done all right. He's done all right.
Johnny Vegas.
Done okay.
Justin Morehouse.
Yeah.
Alex Boardman. Well, Alex Boardman, I suppose.
But I think he should have been. That's what I mean. People like Alex Boardman, Tony Burgess. I think they should have been much higher level than they actually are now. Yeah, Alfie Joey's done okay, hasn't he, in terms of BBC Radio and stuff? Smug.
Who else is? Who else from them days? Well, he did the first gig with me, or I think the next gig with me, it was Alan Carr.
Yeah, Alan Carr's done really well, hasn't he? He did maybe more than I'm really giving credit for, But I'm talking about, Alan Carr's a good example, and John Bishop going to that really top level of doing TV show on a Saturday night, which is what everybody's dreaming of. But quite a few of them live at the Apollo that we've worked with, haven't they? So I've seen people do that,
Thingy, you just said then, I forgot his name.
Not Alan Carr, no.
No, after Ankar.
John Bishop, no?
John Bishop, yeah, he started doing. He did Beat the Frog or what?
Yeah.
That thing on a Monday night. That's where because I remember what were the two bouncers called that always.
I can picture him, but I can't remember now. But
it's like Max and Paddy was based on him, wasn't it? I think.
John tells that story about when he first did it, doesn't he? That He'd separated from his wife. He ended up getting back together with her.
Yeah.
But he separated from his wife, and it's one of those things where he had the kids at weekend, and he said on Monday night he'd feel absolutely terrible because he wasn't going to see the kids for a week. He'd lost a lot of the friends because a lot of the friends were friends of the couple. So he just used to go out drinking in Manchester, and he just passed the Frog and Bucket one day, and it said open mic tonight, 4 or 5 quid to get in. If you perform it, it's free. So he just put his name down, said I'll get him for free, just get on the stage, and he couldn't believe how well he did, just talking off the top of his head. And he tells the story that he got the Friday night gig. He gets up and does a load of stuff slagging his wife off, to telling loads of jokes about his wife, goes back to the bar, and this woman comes walking up to him and he thinks, oh God, it's the missus. This is going to cost me another £20,000 on the divorce settlement kind of thing. And his wife came up to him and said, seeing you up there, it was just like the old John, and I really enjoyed it. And he got talking to her and they had a drink and they got back together again. So it was the fact that she'd seen him doing comedy. That I don't know how much that's true. So he told me that over a pipe once, then I saw him telling it on the Jonathan Ross show. Yeah.
It's mad that, innit? That your missus can see you slagging her off on stage.
My kids used to say they do jokes about us, and I really didn't. They always used to be paranoid that I might,
Yeah, is there anything you try and avoid when you're writing?
I mean, the obvious things, the isms, but I would naturally... I would naturally sort of shy away from that anyway. When I was doing the bootleg Mark Chapman's, the double act, the musical double act, we used to do a version of Leader of the Pack, which was called A Pedo in the Mac. And at that time, we're going back about 20 years. It's clearly a very dodgy thing to do. But it was when the Madeleine McCann happened, and we kind of sat down and said, we can't really do that one anymore. But actually, it wasn't okay to do it before Madeleine McCann disappeared, was it? So, maybe the barriers have sort of changed a little bit. But it's one of the things about writing about, the full-length shows I do. I choose topics that are not going to lead me into slightly dodgy areas because of the nature of what I'm talking about, really. Although the one I'm doing about two-tone, the point about two-tone music is that it was the first music to unite black and white artists in the same bands. Not quite the first. There was Phil Lynott in Thin Lizzy. There was Mungo Jerry. There was a handful.
He was from Wally Range, wasn't he?
Phil Lynott. I thought it was a
sorry, but The Boys Back in Town was written about his fellow Lynott's mum, I think it was, used to run a pub in Wally Range. And it was when they all got out of Strange Ways. Come back to the pub and he was seeing it all going on. And apparently that's where that's written from.
There's a famous line to that. There's going to be a jailbreak somewhere in this town. It's probably going to be at the jail, isn't it? That's another matter. But yeah, so I've written this script about two-tone, and there's a poem in it called Kick It Out, which is about the kicking racism out of football thing. And I sort of referenced Patrice Evra and John Terry and some of those things. And I sent the script to the people at Coventry, several of whom are from black ethnicity. And I'd used the N-word twice in this poem, and it was clearly contextualised. It was about Suarez calling Evra by that word, and I put the word in, and they kind of came back and said, "We get it. We know you're not being racist. We know it's a really strong anti-racist statement, but best not to use it at all." So I kind of rewrote that poem so that it's obvious what you're referring to, but you kind of stop halfway through the sentence. So do
you think your background in teaching helps you with, because that's something saying about from comedy then to comedy now, there's that much technical stuff now that goes on with different things and genders and I don't know where to stand and what the correct words are a lot of the time, so I just avoid it.
No, it's a nightmare teaching English in Salford. I'm not even allowed to call the kids thick anymore. It's PC gone mad, but your point is a good one. Well, funnily enough, I once wrote an article about the overlap between teaching and stand-up, because you've got famous comedians like Frank Skinner, Greg Davis, Romish Ranganathan, who I mentioned before. There's loads and loads of people who come. Johnny Vegas was a pottery teacher before he did comedy, and there's absolutely loads of them. Whenever we did the Comedy Balloon or something, people like Sean Moran, there was always, if I was on a bill with 9 or 10 other comedians, there's a very good chance that I wasn't the only teacher, and sometimes there was about 2 or 3. And I started wondering about that one day, and I thought, I suppose there is a lot of overlap. There's getting your timings right, making sure you cover what you need to cover, dealing with hecklers, teaching English in Salford and all that type of thing. Like you say, choosing your words very carefully to articulate what you're trying to say without, without overstepping the mark and things like that. So I think it'd be an interesting sort of thing to research, really. The overlap between teachers and comedians, even going back to the likes of Jim Moen on Bullseye. There's a real sort of tradition of it.
Well, was Jim Bowen a teacher?
Jim Bowen was apparently a teacher, yeah.
Yeah, he's funny if he was your teacher. Come and have a look at what you could have.
There's that famous thing that he actually went back, when he talked about John Bishop going back and doing Mick Miller, who was a traditional comedian on the television in the 70s, and started going back to the old circuit, So, quite a few of those. And Jim Bowen apparently did an Edinburgh show where he talked about how terrible Bullseye was and kind of recognises how amateurish he was. He said he'd seen Bob Monkhouse, who was the absolute master of doing it. And he said the very first pilot, he was talking to the couple, when they introduce themselves and chat a little bit. And he said, "Are you married?" And this guy said, "I'm divorced." So he said, "Smashing." Yeah.
So what do you reckon then with like what's your plans for? Are you just going to keep going like you're going, or have you got any?
I mean, as I say, I've got so many different. Well, first of all, I'm likely to retire in 2 years. My mortgage finishes at 2 years, so at that point, I'll have even more time to spend. But it's like I had a pile of marking to do this week because the students have just done the first assessments, and I had a gig on Friday. I was comparing a music gig on Friday, doing a little bit of banter, and then I had a gig with a group last night. And there was a point during the week where I thought, I think I might have to cancel those 2 gigs because I need to keep on marking, I need to keep ahead of myself. And immediately a different thought kicked in and said, no, this is what you're working for. So you can enjoy yourself on a Friday and a Saturday and do the things that you really want to. The marking can wait a couple of days and you'll still, you'll catch up at some point. So I'm looking forward to the point where I'm retired in 2 years and pretty much I'm not going to be looking around for things to do. I've got various writing projects in mind and things like that. So
I remember you used to do part of your act, I don't know if you still do, but you that used to be what the kids had put, like answers to questions and stuff like that. Yeah.
Genuine things that kids have written. So it's things like Macbeth was shocked when he saw the witches hoovering in the sky. So the one which he just stand away now. And what was it? There's a few of them. Oh, that was it. Yeah, there was a kid who was writing about extreme sports. And he said, I like extreme sports like bungee jumping and windsuffering. I think he meant windsurfing, but I got to the age now where windsuffering really is an extreme sport, so I'm not entirely sure. So I tapped into that. I mean, I do a lot of writing as well. We didn't one project that I was involved in for about 8 or 9 years was actually at the Comedy Store. Shut now the Comedy Store, isn't it? It's no longer with us as far as I know.
No, well, I think
it's going to they do things out in the community.
It flooded, didn't it? Flood, over COVID, and then I think they still run one in Walkabout Bar.
There's a couple actually.
It's all booked through London.
I think they've done one in Beer Keller as well. I don't know if that's a regular
Beer Keller,
thing.
That's what I was thinking.
But I think it was that freight. Well, the one I went to, it wasn't a great venue for comedy, to be honest. It was this big long hall, really echoey, like anybody chatting anywhere nearby. It was just that you could
Amplified.
hear everybody speaking apart from who was on stage. And the staff weren't cutting any of it down or anything. But I think the problem with the actual Comedy Store is there was a hole in the roof, and there's an argument between the Comedy Store and the trams because the trams run over the top of it about who has to pay for the repairs.
Right.
I think that's why it's been shut for so long.
Close since COVID, hasn't it?
It flooded, didn't it, over COVID, I think.
Yeah. My association with the Comedy Store, I'll just let you into one little state secret if you've never played it, but on the door where you enter the stage, there's a great big sign saying "Don't fuck it up," which I've always quite liked. But I was involved in a project called the Unbroadcastable Radio Show for about 7 or 8 years, where I was a writer but not a performer. There was people like Toby Haydock, Alfie Joey, Peter Slater. There was a few. John Warburton was involved for a while, and we basically did a monthly show which was topical humour. And it was called the Unbroadcastable Radio Show because they had scripts in hand. So it was as if you were doing a radio show where you could hold your script, but in front of a live audience. And the key was to do topical stuff. And what I found at that point, when you were asking about the creative process, I was watching the news. I wasn't that interested in what was going on. I was just thinking, is there a joke in that? Is there a sketch in that? And it was because we were kind of writing, political stuff every month. And there was actually a point where we used to do it on a Sunday evening, and they found Saddam Hussein hiding in a foxhole about 2 hours before the show. So we were all sitting in the dressing room saying, "What can we write about Saddam Hussein? There's no way we could not reference it." So that was quite a good discipline because we used to go to somebody's house on a Friday afternoon the day before the show, and everybody would bring the script along. And because I wasn't performing, they would rehearse all day Sunday, but I didn't need to be in for the rehearsals. And everybody would bring 27 pages of script on the Saturday afternoon. And if you were the fifth one out of the 5 of us who were writing, nothing was funny anymore. Nobody was remotely interested. And it was Toby Haydock who said, everybody brings 10 pages of font size 16. And if you think of a better idea than what you've already got on your 10 pages, you get rid of your weakest idea and you bring in your new idea. And it was an absolutely brilliant discipline for writing. And I've kind of embraced it ever since. Don't overwrite. If you've got enough, then have a look at what you've got. And every time a new idea comes, say, right, what's the weakest thing I've got?
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to put that instead of that. And
that's exactly what I do with my set.
Yeah.
How long do you reckon you spend writing? We had we had Sam Serrano on, and he said he writes 2 hours every day.
No, nothing like that for me.
Yeah.
It's
but I thought that was, I don't know that many words, mate.
Yeah, I think people who are actually writers by profession actually discipline it. I saw a South Bank show about Little Britain where they had an office and they would turn up at 9 o'clock every day and go for lunch and then come back. So, but we're not making that kind of money out of it, are we? So it doesn't justify the expense. I kind of wait for the muse to descend, I suppose, for want of a better word. And,
exactly the same.
Yeah. And when you're saying about one-liners, one thing that I have done, which has sometimes been quite lucrative, is to simply open a dictionary and just keep on flicking through. And because the English language has got so much elasticity and flexibility of meaning, there's a joke, I bought my niece a jigsaw, but she plugged it in and cut 2 of her fingers off. And everybody assumes when you say jigsaw that you mean, but of course a jigsaw is also a tool, isn't it? So sometimes my eye will just light on a word and say...
And it could be a wound from dancing.
Okay, yeah, fair enough, yeah. Yeah. I've got one about, I'm writing my memoir at the moment. I'm exactly 2/3 of the way through. I've written a memo. And the reason I love that one is it's not the funniest joke in the world, but it is mathematically accurate because memo is 2/3 of it. Which I think is far more important.
Yeah.
So we've done an hour.
Yeah, done an hour, mate.
Are you happy with that?
Yeah, if you're happy with that.
Are you happy with that?
I'm more than happy if you're
plug her out, Tony? Or?
I can't think of anything we haven't spoken about that I wanted to, so yeah. No, if you're happy that you've got what you need, that's fine with me.
Yeah, no, brilliant, mate. I appreciate it. And thanks, Murph, as well, for all your service. Murph's leaving us, as I said, for maternity leave.
On a black and white video of just slow motion me laughing and sad music.
There'll be one scene.
What does the baby do? Is this a joke about this?
No,
genuine. Just he laughs every time he says it. Yeah.
No, baby.
Don't take a lot, not mate.
Yeah, we'll have some. If you can just do that on the way out, and we'll do it to like the Breakfast Club music.
Don't suppose you guys are free for the balloon on Wednesday? Just to.
I might come down and watch.
I'll do it.
That's why I'm saying it. Yeah.
I might come down and watch.
Seeing Joey twice in a week, that's going to be weird.
Yeah.
I'll have to try and think of some jokes.
Yeah, ideally, mate.
You know what the key is to one-liners? It's alphabetical order. Right. So I could now tell you 5 jokes. Let's say I bought an advent calendar from McDonald's. When I opened the first window, it said go to window 3 to collect your chocolate. I play bass guitar in a band called Ass. We think we're really original, but everyone keeps mixing us up with Elbow. I tried to join Amnesty International, but I joined Amnesia International. We get really worked up about global injustice, but we forget to do anything about it. And the reason I can reel those 3 jokes off, the key word begins with A.
With A.
Ass, Advent.
I'm dyslexic though. So.
All right. I did once buy a book about called Daily Sex, and it turned out to be about dyslexia. Yeah.
That's always my name on, fancy football.
Yeah.
Dyslexia Untied.
Brilliant. Yeah.
My favourite ever one was on fancy football. Was my mate's. Was his little sign? His little tagline was Paul Scholes is tackling coach.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I do like the fancy football names. Crystal Phallus is one of my favourite ones. Yeah. Anyway,
All right, brilliant. Thanks a lot, Tony. Cheers, everyone.